Hi, thanks for tuning in to Talk Spirit. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different from my norm. I'm usually doing readings, but what we're going to be talking about today is UFOs, aliens, extraterrestrial, and I have invited two special guests on today, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. They are the authors of a book, Who They Are and What They're Up to. So they're going to be able to give me this insight as they're both UFO witnesses. They have been researching these UFOs and these beings for, I believe you guys said 20 years. And yeah. So, just explain, what you guys have been up to, how you guys have acquired your information, your research, and, what are these beings?
Well, for me, when I hit about the age of 30, I decided I needed to, which was about 34 years ago now, I decided I needed to get some closure or I needed to find out what was going on in my family for like 4 generations. I was told from the age of 3 that we had a family spirit guide by the name of Old Glegley that was a helper and a protector that would show up and would help people or impart knowledge or whatnot. So for me, from the age of 3, I was repeatedly visited by this invisible being, kind of like a cat, but not a cat. But it was bipedal, so it would jump on my stomach and my chest in the middle of the night, kind of playfully, and I just accepted it as being just a normal thing because my family, they grew up in wartime England, my mother and my father, and this was something that had been following us, from Germany first, and then to England, and then to California. So I just accepted it. I was 3 years old. So for me, after a bunch of weird things that we'll get into that have happened to me throughout my life, consistently in different houses and different places, I decided to start doing my own research about the age of 30 when I was an acupuncturist. Did a lot of reading. It was way before the time of like cell phones and smartphones, so I did a lot of just reading, and I've had 5. I've seen 5 UFOs in my time, and Leslie will tell you about her 2 that she has seen, and that's a lot of the reason why when she first saw her first UFOs, a lot of the motivation for why about 20 years ago that we decided to start
researching for real.
To researching for real together. Yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you about that one. It was life-changing for me. I had heard of Stephen's experiences for as long as we'd been together. From
30 years we've been together.
For 30 years we've been together, but in 2005 I still hadn't seen anything myself, and in 2000, the year of early 2004 to 2005, he saw 3 UFOs, I believe, right?
Well, I saw the first one when I was about...
The USO and the Yucca Valley one, right?
Yeah, I saw one when I was 11 years old.
Okay,
too.
So he saw 2 more when he in the years 204 and 205, early 205. And I really wanted to see something of my own, just for that 100% belief,
She was a little jealous, actually.
Yeah, I was a bit jealous, to be honest. And then there it was, the UFO, the white light in the sky.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say it's interesting that you guys said that you've seen some things down in Yucca Valley and Palm Springs, because I actually used to live in 29 Palms back in 2008, and I saw some things that were behaving erratically in the sky as well. I remember I was driving through the desert out there. I believe this was like Joshua Tree area, what I was driving through, that street that goes through. Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe it's the military, because we did live at the time I was married to my ex. We lived on the military base, but I wasn't on the military base at that time. I was driving, and I saw something very similar to what you're talking about. So that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
we're on the 33rd parallel, which is supposed to be the latitude where apparently there's a lot of activity, UFO activity on the 33rd parallel. So sure enough, Joshua Tree is kind of a hotbed of UFO activity.
Yeah.
We hear about it a lot from
Yeah,
people.
there's the Integratron. You might have, like, when you lived out toward 29 Palms,
Mhm.
you probably heard about the Integratron and Giant Rock that are in Landers, which is probably like about an hour and a half away from 29 Palms. But yeah, I mean, I spent 6 years in the military. I did a tour of duty on 29 Palms base
Yeah,
in
so he was there too.
1983, and then more recently in 2013 when I got really seriously injured. But regardless, is that, yeah, I've actually seen the black helicopters. A group of friends of mine, like 7 of us, we were at Giant Rock after going to the Integratron for a friend's birthday, and it happened to be a full moon, and we were like, we had the radio going, we had the couple cars there, and girls were dancing, that kind of stuff, and then from behind, backlit by the full moon that was coming up, there were these 2 black helicopters that were obviously coming from the 29 Palms military base, and they were about maybe 200 to 300 feet in the air, and absolutely soundless. And they did this. It was like their course. They did this. They did this basically. They flew over Giant Rock, and then they went back to the base.
An obviously large visual marker,
and
to go around.
They were single prop, and they were black, and they made absolutely no sound. And this happened about 2005. I think 2005. Yeah,
Again,
it was in like around June of 2005. The only reason that we knew they were there is because they were being backlit by the full moon, and we just looked, and we were a little intimidated, but by the same token, like, I've been on the twin prop of helicopters when I was in from 80 to 86 with the Marines and with the Seabees. I was a Seabee, so I was familiar with the helicopters, and these were just something that. In other words, what I'm saying is that
we think they've reverse engineered alien technology in order to make them silent.
We have at least sound canceling technology.
Yeah, we figured that out at least.
Yeah, at least that.
But
so, is this the U.S. that is, like, when we're talking about these helicopters? Is this like military that's doing this? Is this
29? Yeah, the 29 Palms base.
Yeah, what we saw that night in June, which was the full moon in 2005, what a group of us saw, they were definitely U.S. helicopters. There were 2 of them that were coming from the 29 Palms military base. It was really interesting that they basically did a circle around Giant Rock, and then they went right back. It's like that was their pathway, or that was their training route, whatever.
Yeah, just a training route.
So we definitely have the technology. And people say the black helicopters that make no sound. The only reason we knew they were there is because there was a full moon.
You could see
if it had been dark, we would have no clue. They were about 200 feet above us. We would have no clue they were there. So yeah.
And so also there's a ley line, supposedly, an energy line going through Joshua Tree, and this is where we are now,
and Giant Rock,
Desert Hot Springs and Landers and so on. So it is kind of like a hotbed, and so I have seen a second one. We were here in our home in Desert Hot Springs, which is a little bit south of Joshua Tree. And,
I'm familiar with the area.
So you know the area, yeah. So we, again, it was a white light in the sky. This time,
Sky Valley.
It was making these impossible angular zigzaggy motions up in the sky at speed. Whenever we turn an aircraft around, we have to slowly bank into a big U-turn. But these were making V turns at full speed without even slowing down the tiniest bit. And then it did the same thing as the other one had done. It took off north and was gone in not even a whole second.
The fun thing is we had just moved into our house just a few days before.
Yeah.
And for me, which I want to segue into this, as far as these entities have been following me and my family, at least for me, for at least 6 different houses, okay? And my family from Germany to England to California. and whatnot. So when we saw this one, the second one that Leslie saw, we saw together about 9:30 at night in late October
2020 of October.
2020.
Yeah, 2020.
We have a very, very small backyard, which means we have a very, very small view of the sky. Okay, very limited view of the sky.
Yeah, a little triangle.
And we went out there, and it was like saying, "Hey," to me. It was like saying, "Hey, I know where you are.
Hey,
We know where
Steve,
you
yeah.
are," and saying hi. We're keeping tabs on you, kind of stuff. And it did its thing, like Leslie said, and then it left. So it's like the chances. Sorry, that was my microphone.
Don't whack your microphone.
Yeah, the chances of that happening. Again, for me, because we'll get into it later as far as the things that have happened in my life.
Well, I think you should get right into it now.
We could.
Yeah.
We should let Jenny.
I had a question. So it's interesting because you use the term entities, these entities, and as you know, I am a psychic medium, so that's a term that I am familiar with as these beings that are as spirit, things like that. And I've always been curious. Like, I know you had mentioned that we do the military, the U.S. military themselves do have some type of intelligence to have these type of spacecrafts as well. So that answers some of my questions. But when we say these beings when we think of aliens, extraterrestrial, is this some type of spirit? Is that what we're dealing with? Is it a spirit itself when we use the term entity?
I'll take this.
Well, I wanted to, before you get started,
okay.
I believe that they are communicating with Stephen on the astral plane, and they continue to monitor the people they abduct for their whole lives, really. And I believe it's in the astral plane that they're monitoring.
Yeah, primarily this recurring being that I've known as I was told from being very, very young is called Oglegli, which apparently in Tunisia means my friend, okay, which I didn't know, but this goes into my my uncle Doug, who was a Griffiths, and he was married to my mother's older sister, and he was actually, his life was saved by this spiritual being that we thought it was a spiritual being at the time.
Like a spirit guide.
Right,
family,
spirit guide.
Yes.
Yeah, he was well aware of it. He was in his very, very early 20s. He was a RAF, Royal Air Force pilot, just post World War II, and he was stationed in Ceylon, which is modern-day Sri Lanka, and he was in a multi-man tent on a cot, and he was awakened by this tall, skinny entity that had a red fez that was dark, that said, "Douglas, you have to wake up right now. You have to get out of this tent because you're going to be killed. There's a raiding party coming through." And then the entity just disappeared. Douglas, my uncle, who was a no-nonsense guy who grew up in wartime England, he just basically got up and he just basically got out of the tent, and sure enough, a minute or a half later, a raiding party came through with machetes and guns and killed a number of the officers. Yeah. So he recounted this occurrence to me a couple different times when I was like 14, 15 or something like that. And he was deadly serious about this. In fact, his only daughter that he had, when they bought, he was a very wealthy man. He became a very wealthy man in banking and that kind of stuff. But anyway, so his daughter, the first car that she had, her license plate was Oglegli. That's how much they basically credited.
Yeah, it was like a thank you for saving my life.
Thank you for saving my life. And then the things that have happened throughout lifetime, I really, until certain things had happened to me, I always thought this was like a spirit guide, but it turns out we don't think that.
Yeah, not anymore. We think
don't
it's
think alien handler.
We think that there's a gray alien handler for the family, so to speak. But we know of the abduction phenomenon, and Stephen's family fit the profile for it in that frequently a family member will see something frightening or weird or odd, and they'll stare at it and then suddenly black out, even if they're terrified. And several hours will go by, and then they'll wake up back in bed. And this kept happening to the family members. And this we later learned is the signature for the abduction phenomenon.
Right.
Where they, for instance, in Philip's case, Stephen's brother Philip.
My younger brother, yes.
He had an episode. These frequently come in clusters, these things. And for him, he had a cluster of 3 when he was 16.
In a totally different house.
Yeah, it was, and that's the thing too.
Oh,
is
wow.
the hauntings? We know hauntings move. They don't move from house to house to house so much. They're
this is the
they're
house
usually
that
fixed in a place. But this follows the family.
Yeah, this is the house that we were building ourselves. That we were because I was a cabinet maker.
Yeah,
my
so
dad was so.
No one had died there.
Right, so this is something we were building like 350 miles away. So my brother was 16. I'll let Leslie go from there.
So he was sleeping in his bedroom, and he woke up to these 2 white lights shining into his bedroom window, and they were impossible because there was no road back there or houses back there. It was just wooded hillside, you know,
and a creek.
And
yes.
And so he was staring at them, trying to figure out what they were, and then suddenly blacks out and has no memory of what happened after.
1982, by the way.
Then the next night, he's laying in bed, and he hears a scrabbling sound on the floor. And he reaches down to pet what he thinks is the cat, right? He thinks, oh, it must be the cat. So he reaches down, but instead of a cat, a hand grabs his wrist. And he feels this thrill of terror, and adrenaline hit his bloodstream, right?
And then blacks out again.
But then suddenly blacks out. So obviously he's not just falling back asleep. Somehow his consciousness is being dampened, you know? And then the third night of this same cluster of events, he woke up and he looks into his bedroom doorway, and there's a tall gray alien standing there.
Tall, skinny, once again.
It's a 6-foot tall ones, you
At
know,
least 6
with
foot,
the big black eyes and the spindly gray body. And he stared at it for just a few moments and then suddenly blacked out again. So, and Stephen has several of these blackout incidents. And as we started researching, and we discovered this is the signature for the alien abduction phenomenon. Well, and now we think that's what's been going on with the family, because they also protect the family, because it's like their prize cattle, right? They don't want to. They protect their prize cows, you know.
Yeah, for me.
That's scary.
These things happened to me in 19. God, what was it? It was 1979. Yeah, it was January 1979. The whole family experienced these occurrences that happened in the house that I grew up in Fallbrook.
Where was this location at, by the way?
The Fallbrook house.
When this was happening?
Woodland Hills, California.
Yeah, so Southern California.
It's near me. I'm in Santa Clarita.
It's
not too far.
Scary.
Yeah, well, at that time, actually, there were actually sightings, a fair amount of sightings. There was even one famous one that happened in, where was it? It was Tarzana, I think it was, where there was at a drive-in movie, there was a UFO that was sighted somewhere in the 1970s. But there was a number of sightings that were happening. But anyway. In January of 1979, it started out. I'll kind of go through.
Well, this is a cluster that happened when he was 18.
When I was 18.
Tell me that when you were 10 first, because that's important.
So basically, your family has experienced these abductions. Does the abduction look like you actually disappear from here? Like, are you actually taken away, or are they taking your spirit? Yeah.
No, physical. We'll get to that.
We think physical abduction.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, we have evidence for that.
But now that he's older, he's still being communicated with by them, but via more like in the astral plane.
Actually,
how did they communicate? Is it telepathically? Is it how did I communicate with spirit?
Usually,
when I communicate.
Sometimes they actually visit me.
And speak.
I was visited about 3 or 4 months ago by a tall, kind of wide black being with golden eyes that I'd seen before, and it was in my bedroom, and I just decided to confront it and, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
And it moved a bit, and I was kind of like in that state, where you're waking up, but you're awake because you can see your whole bedroom.
Like the
You're
hypnagogic
awake.
state in between.
You're not in
Yeah, I've had that happen, like with the sleep paralysis. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I wasn't paralysis
Right.
at all. I could move, which is the difference.
Oh.
With paralysis, I could move. I could do voluntary movements, but it's like, some people say they see demons, that kind of stuff, which is probably true in sleep paralysis.
Because with sleep paralysis, you're seeing into the astral realm. You're in that state halfway between sleep and awake. It's called the hypnagogic state, and that you can actually go astral in this state. But your body is paralyzed, but Stephen was more awake than that, I think.
Yeah. It's very, very relaxed. I've done it many, many, many times. I mean, I know the difference. I don't really have sleep paralysis where I don't really have that. So, but anyways, this started in 1979, where it started with my dad at breakfast time. He was a master cabinet maker from England. So he said, we were working together, and he said that, Stephen, the closet doors in my bedroom opened and closed on me last night, and I just kind of blew it off, said, "Oh yeah, sure, Dad,"
or just shrugged it off anyway.
I didn't really think very much of it. So the next night, I was just starting to study Tai Chi. We became a Tai Chi master and a Tai Chi teacher for 23 years, and studied all other types of martial arts, very intensely. So anyway, I was also into Paramahansa Yogananda's work. So I was reading his Metaphysical Meditations little booklet. That's really, really good. And I gave my dad the book. I said, "Dad, you should really read this stuff." Again, I'm 18 years of age, and my dad and I, we were living together with my sister. And so I gave him to him about 9 o'clock at night. And he came back into my room about 9:30 with this really puzzled look on his face. And he said, "Stephen, I'm hearing a silver bell in the wall." I said, "Okay, Dad." Okay, so I went to the living room, and sure enough, myself being a lifetime musician, playing multiple instruments at an orchestral level, I heard this silver bell in the wall by the fireplace. It was in the 2x4 wall. And I said, "Well, that's impossible." So we got my sister, who was 13 at the time, and she was kind of like not wanting to have anything to do with this stuff. She just like buried her head in the sand.
Yeah, like
whatever.
This is not happening.
So I got my sister, and my sister said, "Where's that bell coming from?" And so she heard it too. So she went over to the wall. We looked up the chimney flue, and we banged on the wall, and it went on for a good 10 minutes, and then it just stopped. Now, my mom and my brother were living in the house that we were building up in Sonora, California, 350 some odd miles away.
Because Philip had started school up there, so
in the lower Sierras. So it was a beautiful piece of property. So anyway, so we would always call and stay in contact. So my mom said to my dad, "Jeffrey, the weirdest thing happened last night. I heard this bell, and I thought it was the phone about 9 o'clock at night, and I picked up the phone, and there was this disembodied voice, or this man on the other line, the other part of saying, 'I am the invisible Beachy,' or something like that."
Yeah, we still don't know what that means.
And I got my brother, who was 6 years younger than me when he was still alive. He said, the phone didn't ring, but she did pick up the phone, and she swore that the phone rang.
But he didn't hear it. But she heard the bell, even though it was like 350 miles away.
This is simultaneous things happening in two locations, right? So
very strange.
That's crazy.
So the following
That's crazy.
So the following night,
it gets real then.
So here's where it starts to get more real.
Yeah.
Okay? The following night, I'm sleeping. I went to bed in my regular bedroom, and I was awakened in the middle of the night. It's always in the middle of the night by this sound like a whoosh, whoosh. And I thought
whizzing sound.
It sounded like a fan. All right, so I thought it was a fan. Does somebody have a fan on? I thought, was it a bug? And I thought, well, maybe I'm just like hearing things. And I looked down the hallway, and then I said, there's nothing there. There's like a little light on, little light on in the kitchen. So I went back to bed, and as I was trying to get back to sleep, my bed was pushed two kind of gentle times from the base or the foot of the bed, and just like, somebody was like shoving the base of the bed. So, growing up in Southern California, I thought, well, maybe it was like an earthquake. Tried to ignore it, and then it gets shoved again a little bit more, vigorously. And then a third time, it's like, really, it's like saying, "Wake up!"
He starts to get scared at this point.
At this point,
right?
I'm getting ticked off, and also scared.
Yeah.
And then I get tapped on 3 times,
Like,
with an index finger.
yeah, like,
Bang, 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 in my mid-deltoid, just below my shoulder on my right side. And at this point, I'm thinking, is somebody playing a trick on me, or is something really? Is it like old Glegley or something? So then I rolled over and said, "What?" And I could see that there was. I could feel and see there was something was there,
like a shimmery presence.
and then I black out.
Yeah.
I told my dad like at breakfast, and I did not know what to say. My dad did not know what to say, so we went to work. So the next night, I decide I'm not going to sleep in that bedroom. Okay, so I went to sleep in my work clothes, and I slept on the couch in the living room. And so anyway, about 5:30 in the morning. This is January 1979. I woke up like around 5:30, around about that time, and I looked at my piano, thinking about what I was going to play that day, because I was in a group at the time. And then I listened to the little fountain in the other room, and I was awake, so I was definitely alert. Didn't want to get up. And then from behind me was the front door. I was sleeping face up, okay, but from behind me, about 25 feet away, this tall, about 6 to 6.5 foot tall, blue-white, skinny being floated towards me, bringing with it was blue-white, and it brought blue-white light into the whole living room. The whole living room was filled with blue-white light, and it stopped in about a second and a half. It stopped on my right side, and my right side became completely paralyzed. I mean, not in a scary way, okay? I was not terrified, but, my eye was open, but I couldn't close my eye. In other words, I had no voluntary control. And it bent down to me, and it said into my ear, not in my head, but into my ear, it said, "Hi, Steve," in a whisper. And I could not tell whether it was male or female. And I was thinking, being 18 years of age, I was thinking, I'm going to see Old Glegley, the family spirit guide that I've heard about from different people, from Uncle Doug and different people, and my grandmother. And said, but the other half of me, the logical side of me, was saying, dude, you are paralyzed. You can't move.
So he's half excited and then half scared.
I'm half excited, half scared.
Yeah.
And so after about 5 or 10 seconds, the entity basically turned around and left, took all the blue-white light with it. And then I black out. So anyways, the really, really interesting part about this is that 6 hours later at 11:30, my dad and I were getting hungry. And I said, Dad, I'll go get some food for us. So I reached into my right side pocket of the clothes I had been wearing when I was, visited by this entity. And I pulled out the coins, put them on the table. And these are all standard American coins. And all the coins are magnetized. Okay. In other words, I can pick up the coins either by the edge or by the face
with each
or
other,
whatever.
Yeah.
My dad could too. This is 6 hours after it happened. Okay. So
And American coins are specifically designed not to be magnetic because they
right,
want
Yeah.
them to go into vending machines and and Pepsi machines and things, right?
I had some.
So
I
the
had some.
coins are basically sticking together, is what
Yeah,
you're saying. And
they're all
Yeah.
able to pick up nail, and the nails can pick up the nails
I
with the
said I
coins.
also
And,
have some six penny nails too in my pocket
Yeah.
too. But yeah, I can pick up
wow.
the nails with coin. So anyways, my dad and I didn't know what to make of it, but we were workmen. We had the job to finish, so we just went back to work.
Yeah, we surmised that
Yeah.
he was sleeping at this time, and at some time during his abduction, he was exposed to a very powerful electromagnetic field of
Or
some kind.
plasma or something.
Yeah.
But anyways, the last night, which I have no recollection of at all, but my dad does, he was awakened in the middle of the night to seeing a wall of blue-white light that was outside of my bedroom,
Kind of spilling out of his bedroom door.
spilling out of my bedroom. And my dad, having been a policeman in England for 4 years and also being in the Royal Air Force during the war, he was like this no-nonsense guy that grew up here and said, I'm going to go and find out what the heck is going on, right?
Yeah, he was a cop, he was a bobby in England,
So,
like, what's all
so,
this then? Kind
Yeah.
So he got up, he was getting him out of bed, and then in this case, it was a voice inside his head. And the voice inside his head said, Jeffrey, just relax. Go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Stephen's fine. Everything's okay. Go back to sleep. And that's what he did. And I have no recollection at all about that incident. My dad saw it. My dad experienced it. He had no reason to lie. And
that makes no sense either, that he would just fall asleep again either. Like, what's all this then? He's taking the blanket off. He's about to get out of bed. And he's like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And like, oh, okay, I'll just go back to sleep now. So we think, once again, maybe they knocked him out, like they do with the
like
people.
it's draining it's draining energy or something, right? Like it's draining your energy. Yeah, wow, that's interesting.
And a few other things that have happened to myself and other people too, like my sister and my brother, we talked about.
They're a psychic bunch, the whole family. And Stephen actually, about this time, a few years before these cluster of events, he actually saw a ghost. And that actually was more like a haunting, that where the woman was attached to this house.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell about that one?
Oh, that was the Holly Hill house, which is one of the 2 or 3 most famous historical properties,
landmarks on Avalon.
Avalon and Catalina. You probably are familiar maybe with Catalina Island.
Yeah.
My dad and I were remodeling in the summer of 1976. We were remodeling the Holly Hill house, which has a real history in and of itself. That's just below the Wrigley House in the town of Avalon. My dad was working on the cupola, the top of the house, and
like
I was
the pointy part of the Queen Anne mansion. They had those like turrets.
Yeah. So it's you can look it up, the Holly Hill house.
Yeah.
It's got a really interesting history. Victor Christ had bought it to remodel it and to fix it up, also with the Historical Society. So I was working on the downstairs kitchen, and I was this is the summertime of 1976, and just before I turned 16, and I was listening to Chicago a tape that I had of their greatest hits, and I just happened to be listening to Feeling Stronger Every Day. That happened to be on, and the back door facing towards like Pasadena, that area. Okay, there was this woman in old time garb, I call it. This basically black and white figure.
Yeah, she looked like a black and white photo.
Yeah, with this kind of like darkish but kind of grayish curly hair. Just kind of floated by, or just kind of walked by the back door and looked at me like what the hell are you doing in my kitchen, and what are you doing listening to that ridiculous music?
Yeah, that outlandish music.
Outlandish music. And I thought, well, like, is she, I was like befuddled. I thought, well, what's she doing here? She's not supposed to be here. So As soon as she walked by the door, I got up as quickly as I could. I was pretty fast because I was like 16, and I was pretty fast.
Yeah,
And so I went out to go find her. Said, where the hell did she go? And there was no place for her to hide. And she was definitely a lot older than me, and she was just disappeared. So
she didn't walk in the normal way, like we bounce kind of up and down as we walk. She was just kind of cruised straight by and she was staring daggers at him.
It was the fact that she was black and white.
Yeah, that was
and
weird.
That she didn't bob. And I hadn't thought about that for years, but it came up to me. And then we had a not a brochure, but
the Holly Hill
booklet,
house.
A booklet.
The guy who bought it and hired them to work on it made this great booklet of its history, and we discovered that the Giddings family was the only time a woman ever lived in this house for an appreciable amount of time. Mrs. Giddings, her name was Jenny H. Giddings, and she lived in the house from or they owned the house from 1921 to 1961, so 40 some odd years.
40
and
years.
she died in 55 though, and so
in Pasadena.
But this was her home, and she was the only woman to have lived in the house, like I say, for any length of time. And so we did some research and found that she wrote a book about Pasadena society at some point. And on the inside cover of the book, sure enough, is her photo. And Stephen said, "That's her. That's the woman."
That's the woman.
That's
the woman that I saw.
Yeah.
Unmistakable.
We made a post of it on our Instagram page.
It's on our Instagram page
at leslie.shaw.author, and it's up near the top. It's like this Queen Anne mansion. You can't miss the picture of the Queen Anne mansion.
It was.
Oh, wow.
It was a wonderful 2 weeks of my life. I mean, it was a really cool time. There was like this downtown mall with all these kind of, games you could play and that kind of stuff. And it was just a wonderful time, to spend with my dad and to do some fishing and remodel this house.
This great old house,
But to see that, thing, I thought, I had seen so many different things. Like growing up as a kid, I saw these, what I call like garden gnomes.
Yeah, the boys both saw the garden gnomes.
When I was about 8 years old, one time I saw, when I woke up during the middle of the night, I saw these shimmery figures that were like 4 or 5, like about 1 foot tall garden gnomes that were coming into my room, and I kind of freaked out and kind of turned away. And then a few years later, when my brother, who's now deceased, when he turned about 7 years old or so, he started for about 2 years. He started sleeping in the closet, and I said to Philip, I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? And he said, well, I'm afraid of the little men that come in the night. And I remembered what had happened to me, that I had seen them once.
Oh yeah, the gnomes.
Yeah, the gnomes. Yeah, so he was.
Yeah.
He was seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, unfortunately,
One thing we found with our research is that people who are abducted, frequently they'll remember dribs and drabs of information from the abduction. They'll remember being on a table, or they'll remember being on a ship. But then they can't remember the face of their abductors. So for some reason, they can't remember the face. And I think it's something they do to people. They do like...
Yeah, I was going to ask, you think they clear out the memory or something like that?
Tamper with it somehow.
Tamper.
Like turn it into something else. Like people will see owls, or the young boys, they saw gnomes, Stephen's mother one time saw them as Chinese people getting out of a UFO that landed in the living room, went through the ceiling,
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
That was bizarre.
That was a really bizarre tale.
Yeah.
This was at the house in Sonora. This happened to be Chinese New Year, which my parents had no clue that this was the year of the dragon, 1988. They had zero clue. The only thing they were doing that day,
That's weird. It's the year of the dragon now.
Yeah. They will frequently describe these memories as being kind of shimmery. And I've come to think of that as when that's the sign of memory tampering, this shimmery quality of the memories.
Oh, by the way, just to
Yeah.
jump in here, my mom and her mother and her grandmother were all very, very proficient automatic writers.
That's what I meant. They're a real psychic bunch.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, they
very, very proficient.
I
My
automatic right. That's
really.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
my
how I get
grandmother.
my messages for mediumship. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's by
Yeah, my
automatic writing. Yeah.
my mom picked me up when I was 9 years old from elementary school, and she was absolutely in tears. She was literally just really upset. And I said, Mommy, no, what's wrong? What happened? She said, my mother just died. Her mother was in England. We're in California. Her mother was in England, and I just
Hmm.
had met. Well, I actually had, her mother had come over with her husband the year before, and we'd gone to like Solvang, that kind of stuff. And anyways, make a long story short, I said, well, how do you know? He says, well, I was contacted. Well, what do you mean? Well, I got this feeling, and I had to write, and so I was contacted by
Yeah.
automatic writing.
Old Glegley,
And
the
so
family
when my
spirit
dad
guide.
came home from cabinet making, she told my dad. My dad uh, pretty much believed her, but not 100%, because we hadn't gotten the phone call. So like a day and a half later, we got a phone call,
Sure enough, official word arrived.
confirming that her
yeah.
mother had taken a slip and fall and on a cobblestone, cobblestone, and she broke her hip and died. And the same thing happened when her father died about 8 or 10 years later.
And Uncle Clifford too.
And Uncle Clifford, yeah, she knew, and she wrote it down. I saw many things my mom had written that there's no way that she should know. Okay.
And
her and I got really good at the Ouija board, to the point where we, when we were very young, we would, with the planchette, we would even not, once we got it going, we wouldn't even have to have our hands on the planchette. We just have hovering over it, not even touching, or it would just move by itself. And
so vigorously.
I'm not a fan of Ouija boards. I don't
spooky,
I don't know. Maybe it's because I like having control. Like I like having some form of control over like how I get my information. I don't know what it is. I don't care for them myself. I mean, I say to each their own, but
we were missing our keys, and I said, well, if the spirit world's gonna be any use to us at all, let's ask it where the freaking keys are.
I much
it sent us all over the place.
Did they tell you where the keys were?
Yeah, but they weren't there, so that was just useless.
Oh.
But it was I was much better with the Beechwood pendulums that are come out of England.
Yeah, the pendulum is more.
Oh yeah, I like pendulums. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was like some guy. We were at a gathering, and some guy was trying to I didn't know he was trying to trick me, but he was trying to trick me as far as he didn't really believe that I could. I as an acupuncturist, I used the pendulum a lot for being able to basically douse the human body and douse people as far as whether this formula or these herbs, this combination of herbs, would be good for them.
You can also douse them for metals, though.
You can do it also as a light detector and for metals. So anyways, this guy was trying to trick me as far as he had this, what was it, Leslie?
He had this white gold ring on that looked like silver, right? And so he took the thing off and he said, oh, well, yeah, this is silver. And he put it down, and Steve was dousing it, and he says, no, it's not. It's gold. And he goes, whoa, you blow my mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because I have the gift that moved me towards going into the healing field, into the healing arts. Because I did not want to be a cabinet maker. Was what I was doing to help out the family, so my sister and my brother could get through school, and then we could pay our bills.
Yeah.
But it was not. I did not want to inherit that as far as
Yeah, you didn't feel called to that.
No, that wasn't what I was driven to do.
And when Steve was studying his Tai Chi and his, Chinese medicine, of course, but the Tai Chi is a moving meditation, and if the more you do meditation, the more you're able to do astral projection. They just kind of come
Yeah.
together. The more you meditate, the more you open your chakras, and the more you'll start to gain the ability to astral project. And Stephen was doing it naturally with the study of Tai Chi and the opening of his chakras.
I was doing it as a kid, but even before that.
But more so then. And then when we got together, we started doing the practices in earnest, where we would regularly meditate and do chanting that vibrate the chakras, specifically type to open the chakras.
Yeah.
And I started astral projecting too, and it was fun. I was having a good time doing it. I traveled to Egypt a couple of times, and I would go scuba diving, because I was afraid of scuba diving for real, I was afraid of. But for Stephen, when he goes astral, frequently these beings are kind of there on the other side to harass him. I think we discovered that what they do is they find a genetic strain that they like, a family that they like.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, let her ask about that. Yeah.
Okay.
What makes them pick a specific person or a specific family? Please don't say psychic stuff, because I'm a psychic and I'm not trying to.
Sorry, I'm afraid so.
No.
Well, I think it's one of the components, actually, because Stephen's family, they're very psychic, and a lot of the abductees I've spoken to claim to be very psychic people, and I think that might be one of their criteria. But also, we only know from the data. The data is showing that a disproportionate number of abductees are Caucasian.
Yeah, the 16% of the world is Caucasian, thereabouts, but it's around about 80 to 90+% of the ones that are reported abducted are Caucasians. That's to start with.
And
so, Caucasian, psychic. I'm just a sitting duck at this point.
And also a disproportionate number of green-eyed people are taken. Green eyes are a mutation in the human genome.
Recessive.
It's a recessive trait. So for that to be one of the reasons, one of their criteria is kind of strange.
Also RH negative, the Basque people.
And about 4 out of 10 people taken are RH negative. But RH negatives, we only make up 1 in 9 of the population are RH negative. So a disproportionate number of RH negatives. And the Basque population seems to be targeted more. But so the Basques have the highest incident of RH negative in their blood. And so we don't know, are they after RH negative and therefore taking more Basques? Or are they after Basque and therefore taking more RH negative? We're not sure what their real criteria is there. So once we started realizing they're not after like a cross-section of humanity, they're after a very specific gene type. And then they'll start taking that person, once they find it, they'll take that person again and again and again and again through their lives.
Right.
And so often, they're seen like 10,000 times a year, every year, worldwide, I mean. And this is going 50 years that we've been counting.
That's only about 10%.
That was another question I had is, like, you guys were mentioning how there's certain areas, like we were talking about Joshua Tree, 29 Palms, things like that. Is there certain areas, you're saying they are seen worldwide, so they're not just seen in the U.S., even though we hear about it more of the U.S., so there's people in other countries as well seeing them, and they're also being abducted as well. There's people from other places being abducted.
Yeah, in fact, in China, we have MUFON, right? In our country, right? They've got the equivalent of MUFON, but they've got like 2 or 3 million at least followers of their equivalent of MUFON. Where they're like 10 or 20 times more people. They are definitely more interested. In fact, they built the world's largest, about a few years ago, they finished the world's largest satellite dish, which is about a half a mile wide, and they are definitely looking for extraterrestrial life. So definitely the Brits have their own societies and that kind of stuff, and also too, there have been Russians and Chinese higher diplomats that have been caught on hot mics when they didn't know they were being recorded about saying, listen, you'd be surprised how many aliens, or quote unquote aliens, are
living amongst us,
walking amongst us that you wouldn't even know.
I was gonna ask that. Do some of them look like us? Are some of them in human form?
Well, the Nordic aliens, there's different types, right? People talk about the Greys, and one of the types is also called the Nordics. And the Nordics are indistinguishable from human beings. They look like tall Swedes.
Or Norwegians.
Yeah, they have white hair and blue eyes and pale skin, and they're very tall. And but they look like just Caucasian human beings. And then, of course, the Greys are they look much different. But we believe that the Nordics are kind of the ones in charge. The Nordics are the ones that met with Admiral Byrd under the ice sheet in Antarctica. And they're the ones that attacked Admiral Byrd's armada during Operation High Jump. So we believe that this is when our government became fully aware of who these people are and where they live. Because you have broken the atom now,
the atom, as you call it.
We must now intervene, because now we think that ever since then, they've been trying to get us to get off of our nukes, right? They met with Eisenhower at some point, trying to get us to denuclearize. And in 2017, Luis Elizondo, who was head of the ATIP program, he released a story and 3 videos to the New York Times. And this was a big hullabaloo, and the Department of Defense shocked everybody and came out with a statement after that saying this is a real phenomenon. After 80 years of telling us, no, it's swamp gas, it's weather balloons, it's not real, they finally said it's a real phenomenon.
Deny.
And then, but they said, but we don't know what it is. They're still lying to us. It's because we know they know what it is. They have the crashed ships and the dead alien bodies.
And then a few months ago, the new program called Arrow released a report from the Pentagon saying, basically disputing what was said by the previous report, saying, oh yeah, we haven't found any evidence of extraterrestrials. That is because they're playing around with semantics.
Yeah, they're sort of telling the truth that way.
Extraterrestrials, they are intraterrestrials.
Right, they're more like troglodytes.
They live here on the Earth with us.
So what's the difference as extraterrestrials and intraterrestrials? What does that mean?
Extraterrestrial means they're coming
here from other planets.
From Arcturus or from Sirius or from whatnot.
Or even just from Mars. But if they're coming from any other planet, they're extraterrestrial.
It's semantics they're playing with.
But so they're saying, oh, there's no proof of extraterrestrial. There's no proof of extraterrestrials. But we know that for a fact that's because they're not extraterrestrials. They're living here and sharing the planet with us.
That's why they care so much about playing around with nukes. That's why they were worried, because
they would also get destroyed if we blow up the world.
They have skin in the game, and
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
it's just common sense.
And that's why they're abducting Caucasian people. Why? They're Caucasian people. They're essentially a branch of humanity that split away from us thousands of years ago, we believe. The cause of the Great Flood. The Younger Dryas comet struck the ice sheet where is now Lake Superior. But at the time it struck, it was still coming out of an ice age, and so it was all ice there. And so it struck where Lake Superior is now and caused a cataclysm, essentially. That caused this worldwide flood. And that's 13,000 years ago, we now know. We knew it because of the extinction events that happened back then. Like the mammoth was wiped out, the Clovis people disappeared, the mastodon and the American horse and the American camel. All the big animals of the plains were wiped out.
And what happened? The flash freezing in Siberia.
Yeah, that weird flash freezing.
Of the crocodiles and everything else.
And the mammoths with the food still in their mouths.
So anyways, there's what's called the Uccello
Yeah, the Uccello Horizon is a layer of soil from 13,000 years ago.
Yeah, that is found on 4 different continents in 10 different countries. That's about an inch thick. That shows that all those countries at the same time, all the forests were on fire, which is what happens when a comet comes in.
Yeah, the air bursts in front of it caused fires to set. Actually scraped off the planet by the giant tsunamis that were caused by the comet regenerated from the 10,000.
Our 8 billion have regenerated from those 10,000, which means we're less genetically diverse. In fact, probably telepathy was not that uncommon, before the cataclysm.
We think it's a human birthright because as we started doing the work, the chakra opening work and the kundalini raising work, we started becoming more telepathic. And so this one guy in Australia, he wrote a book called The Hair of the Alien. He woke up one night in the middle of the night and this woman was straddling him, and there was another woman in his bed with him, and he was paralyzed. He couldn't move. But they proceeded to have sex with him while he was all but paralyzed. And the one woman that he's straddling him had white hair, it appeared, and she had giant blue eyes, like their eyes were too large for her face, kind of like a hybrid alien being of some kind. And she put her
chin.
Yeah, a pointy chin and pointy cheekbones, kind of a little bit of an alien face. And she put her hand on her stomach while she's straddling him and points up to the sky. And the next morning he awakens to find one of her hairs in bed with him. So he gets this hair genetically analyzed, right? And it turns out it is human, but not normal human. It was, first of all, it was clear, like fishing line. And humans don't have clear hair. It's not a normal type.
Albinos.
Not even a known type for humanity.
So it was
their population. So it was human, but mutated human, bizarre human.
A bizarre mix, yes.
And that fits right in with our theory that they're not coming here from distant star systems. Really,
so they live among us, is what we're basically saying.
They live among us and under us. We still think they have these underground bases, and of course they have technology. They have spaceships, right? So we believe they have some extraterrestrial activity in our solar system. We think there's some bases on Mars, for instance, and there has been a structure was discovered on Phobos, one of the Mars's moons. And on our own moon, on the dark side of our moon, there's some structures there that can't be explained by,
From what we can find out, that the Greys are probably a manipulated race that is being used kind of like as slaves.
Yeah.
Human beings do not make good slaves. We do not make good slaves. So
we think years ago they were using us as slaves, but we think they kind of gave up on that and started. They used genetic modification just like a tool, like any tool that you might use.
Like we use Legos.
Yeah, just they don't have any problems or qualms about using it. So when we think they're making these Greys as like a slave race, because the Greys are not a normal race of beings. They're they never have any emotion of any kind.
Greys? You're saying the Greys are doing this?
Yeah,
so
the Greys.
This brings me to a question. Is some of these alien species, as we want to call them, are some of them good? Do they come in peace, or some bad? Is it kind of like split like the human race, where you have your good and your bad? Their intentions,
Yeah, this is where we've got to be real specific about this. We do not, at least at this point, we do not believe that they're a bunch. Again, we got to be really specific. We don't believe that, let's say, there's insectoids coming from Arcturus and they're coming from over here. What we see is that we were uplifted about 300,000 years ago by the Anunnaki. They uplifted the
Homo erectus into Homo sapiens.
Basically, what has happened is that there's not a bunch of different races that are coming here. There's basically one race that uplifted us, and now we're the remnants of that. And we basically, like, we have a whole chapter in the book showing that comets and meteors that hit the Earth happen a lot more frequently than people would believe.
Yeah, we think that that's why they never came back. Some of them never came back out. And see, when I see grays, when I look at a gray alien, I see a cousin who has been underground for too long. You know, they never came back out. Their eyes got huge, you know, and the pupils grew.
Got paler.
They became paler. They don't need hair anymore because they're not needed to be protected from the sun. They became, you know, this scrawny race. And I think what happened
different
with
diet.
them, I think
so they
Nordic
adapted
aliens,
to underground, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Just grow up underground, and all they know is they grow up underground in a geothermal environment and whatnot. They would probably be a little bit scared of going onto the surface because they say, "Oh, it's a lot more dangerous on the surface." So,
and they always come at night because I think they can't tolerate. Our
think about the vampire.
Sun, you know,
the sun, maybe.
Yeah. And we think the mythos of the vampire mythos, the succubus, the incubus, we think it all comes from the alien abduction phenomenon.
Yeah.
Believe me, Ginny, when I was researching,
I was going to ask that when we were talking, when you were.
I have to talk about this, you know, because it's just so odd. It's just the more I researched it, the odder it got, you know. And but it looks like about 10% of abductees are women who are impregnated. They're taken and impregnated with hybrid alien beings, and then they are then the baby fetus reaches about 4 months old,
about 5 centimeters,
and they're taken again, and the fetus is stolen. And as soon as I'm reading this, and this is actually, and they report one after another of these reports is the same. And frequently the women will report later in life being taken again and introduced to their hybrid offspring,
sometimes,
you know.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, with ultrasounds and with obstetrics, you know, we can confirm that
it really is happening.
Yes, they actually were pregnant, and then the obstetrician says, according to this, it looks like you were never pregnant at all, ever.
They vacuum out the entire womb, taking all the placenta with them, unlike a miscarriage, you know, where the doctor has to do that later.
Yeah.
But this is like they come and they take the placenta with them. And we think we know where they're taking the babies.
Well, possibly.
Yeah, one possible location was there's a base that in the ufology community we call the Dulce Air Force Base, but it's really
it's in New Mexico.
It's a military base underground that has 7 levels underground, and the first top 5 levels are supposed to be just U.S. military only, but the bottom 2 levels are supposed to be U.S. military / alien personnel.
Well, extraterrestrial.
And our cousin, so, you know,
we keep on mixing the terms.
Yeah, but sorry, you know, but they're so the kind that were spotted there one time was this Phil Schneider's report, where he was a contractor there working at the base, and they were doing some expansion of the underground facility, and a wall came down, and on the other side of this wall were a bunch of aliens. And on his side were a bunch of green berets, you know.
The tall aliens.
And some were reptilian-like, and some were more like the tall grays. And they ended up having a battle, and because obviously the green berets on the human side were not in the know of what this base was all about, right?
Schneider lost 2 fingers.
Yeah, he had 2 fingers blown off, and he said one green beret guy saved his life from he took a shot to the chest and jumping in front of him to save his life, and so
and he ended up mysteriously
dead in his room.
Supposedly he strangled himself with a rubber
tubing was found wrapped around his neck.
Right,
yeah.
And he just would not be quiet about this stuff. He was saying, "This is what is happening."
And it was called a suicide, but
there have been multiple different things. Like even the guy who built the Integratron, George Van Tassel, up in the Landers
Joshua
area,
Tree, Landers
area. Yeah. He also died mysteriously too. It's been, the guy also too who was doing remote viewing. remote viewing.
Yeah. When the secret, our government was desperate to keep the secret for quite a long time. We think that they're slowly edging us towards disclosure, and at least we hope for that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
but we think that the government knows all about these, but at such a high echelon that only just a few, maybe Joint Chiefs, know what really is going on with it.
You know, the ocean that's below the mantle and that kind of stuff that we've been able to find over the past 20 years is actually bigger than the oceans on the surface. So
Yeah.
there's an ocean.
I heard something about that. I was listening to another
real.
podcast, and they were talking about this. It's real. Wow.
For instance, when the astronauts came back from Apollo 11 and they were debriefed, and they had just been to the moon, right? 1969. And they were decontaminated, debriefed, and
they were scared.
They looked scared
and nervous and depressed. Yeah, exactly. Instead of like, woo, we went to the moon.
You just got back, from going to the moon.
Yeah.
The most depressed. It's like you gotta look at like what's reality.
And then later, Buzz Aldrin, he's so old now that you can't threaten him with the silence anymore. You can't threaten him anymore. It's like, what are they going to do to me? So he's been actually coming out and saying that they were followed. The Apollo 11 mission to the moon was followed the entire way to the moon, and there's like 2 minutes cut out of the moon's video right after they land, and we think that it had something to do with that there's a story that they found them waiting there for them when they got there, because they want us looking up. They used to play God, now they're playing space alien. And when did you ever hear the story about Valiant Thor? Valiant Thor
I haven't.
This man in the 50s, mid-50s, he lands a spaceship in a Virginia field and gets out of the spaceship and says, "Take me to your leader." Essentially,
close to the Capitol, basically. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty close to the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So he's taken to the Pentagon, and they debrief him, and he ends up being an advisor to the government for like 3 years at the Pentagon.
He looks just like,
and he's human. He's a Caucasian, red-haired man. Right?
6 foot tall, whatever.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, and I'm from Venus," and we now know that that's a lie, right? Because Venus is nothing can live on Venus, right? No human can live there. So where did they come from? Well, we now know it's because they're living under our feet, and they don't want us to know it. They want us looking up.
That's
and not
wild. Oh my God.
And you're really paranoid,
that I have been hearing for the majority of my life. I mean, I've heard like at least 100 times, but not more. I've heard the 3 knocks behind my head, like on the wall, like the
just trying to go to sleep,
Trying to go to sleep,
bang, 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 right behind your head,
right? Or I would hear a door slamming, or I'd hear like a plate glass being broken, and sometimes I'd hear musical instruments. But for me, it's like, and then
that's scary.
He started to hear things like he thought that I was like trying to do something, whatever, when I was up there with Leslie.
He became really paranoid. He blamed Steve for some weird stuff that was happening
to
him.
Fall.
Like I was saying, their whole family is really psychic. His sister is now a ghost hunter in England, northern England, going to these great old castles, Mary Queen of Scots old castle or old house.
The Karen Sinclair at the ghostly
locations.
Ghostly locations.
Is their handle.
Wow, cool.
Ghostly locations.
I definitely go to paranormal places as well and do things like that. So yeah, wow.
There's definitely a paranormal aspect to the entire UFO phenomenon.
Yeah, there is something to with the communications, definitely.
It definitely connects to the astral plane because
information then. Yeah.
Thank you.
More information than I have ever gotten before. A lot of questions you guys answered that I didn't even have to ask. So, yeah, that is amazing.
So we should make one more shameless plug for the book, I guess. It's Who They Are and What They're Up To by Leslie and Stephen Shaw. And you can get it on Amazon and Ingram Books. And we also have our Instagram page where we're posting a lot of Stephen's experiences, the family's experiences, because we can never cover all of them in a podcast. There's just so many of them. So I wrote them into these series on our Instagram page called Stephen's Alien Abduction Stories, or Stephen's Just Plain Weird Stories, or Stephen's Hearing the Other Side stories, like
and other
the astral realm kind of, you know. So
I checked out a couple of those. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go now. I got to check out more. So very interested.
That's the Instagram page is at leslie.shaw.author, and Leslie is spelled leslie.shaw.author. And then we have a website too, is whotheyarebook.com, where we have blogs and excerpts from the book, and we make links to any podcasts that we do.
The Holly Hill House, which is that on? Is that on the Instagram?
It's on Instagram, yeah.
Yeah. The recent one we posted on the Holly Hill House.
That haunting with the
like
ghost that he saw,
we did a reel that you might want to see that.
Yeah.
It's like just under 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is the limit.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having us on. You know.
Yes, of course. And I do suggest that people go buy this book and read. I'm sure there's so much more insightful information in this book than just what you guys gave us today.
Oh, yeah. We barely scratched the surface.
We just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And the book is only 285 pages. It's only 200.
Oh my goodness! Yes.
To be read in a weekend.
Must read Who They Are and What They're Up To, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. You guys said it's available on Amazon, correct?
And Ingram.
Primarily Amazon, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Bookstores apparently like Ingram better, you know.
I do want to thank you guys so very much for coming on today. This was probably one of my favorite interviews by far. No offense to my other interviewees, like.
Thank you.
But this one was really good.
It really is an interesting subject.
Yes, and it's something I have always had interest in. I am a little scared now. Not gonna lie, because the whole alien thing freaks me out. Even as a psychic medium, it's like that's like a whole nother thing. So a little scared now tonight. So but no, I do thank you guys so very much for coming on. And I really appreciate that so very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Talk Spirit. Until next time, you can book your experience with me at psychicmediumginny.com. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.